like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. The Story of the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there were 3 bears who lived together in a little house of their own in the woods. There was a great big papa bear, a medium-sized mama bear, and a little baby bear. One day, after they had made porridge for their breakfast and poured it into their porridge bowls, they took a walk in the woods while the porridge was cooling, so they wouldn't burn their mouths. And while they were walking, a little girl named Goldilocks came to the house. Now she had never seen the little house before, and it was such a strange little house that she forgot what her mother had told her about being polite. First, she looked in the window, and then she peeped in the keyhole, and seeing nobody in the house, she opened the door. She walked into the house, and right in front of her, she saw a table, and there on the table, there were 3 bowls of porridge. Now there was nothing that Goldilocks liked better than a nice bowl of porridge. So she picked up a spoon and tasted the porridge of the huge papa bear, but it was much too hot. So then she tasted the porridge of the medium-sized mama bear, but it was much too cold. And then she tasted the porridge of the little baby bear, and it was just right. And before she knew what she was doing, she ate it all up. Then Goldilocks saw 3 chairs arranged by the fireplace. They looked so cozy that she just had to try them out. First, she sat down in the huge chair of the papa bear, but it was much too hard for her. And then she sat down in the medium-sized chair of the mama bear, but it was much too soft. And then she sat down in the little chair of the baby bear, and it was just right. So she sat down and rocked back and forth, faster and faster, until all of a sudden the little chair broke and Goldilocks crashed onto the floor. She jumped up and brushed herself off. They sure don't make chairs like they used to, she thought to herself. Now over in the corner she saw a ladder that went up to the 2nd floor, and she thought to herself, I just have to see what's upstairs. So Goldilocks climbed the ladder and found herself in the bedroom where the 3 bears slept. Well, now that her stomach was full with the tasty porridge, she was feeling a little sleepy. So she decided to take a quick little nap. First, she lay down upon the big bed of the papa bear, but it was much too hard. So next, she lay down on the middle-sized bed of the mama bear, but it was much too soft. And then she lay down on the little bed of the baby bear, and it was just right. So she covered herself up warm and snug and fell asleep. Now by this time, the 3 bears thought their porridge would be cool enough, so they came home to eat. They walked into the cabin and went to the table. Now Goldilocks had left the spoon in Papa Bear's bowl.
Somebody's been eating my porridge,
said Papa Bear. And when the mama bear looked at hers, she saw that there was a spoon left in her bowl too. "Somebody's been eating my porridge too," she said. And then baby bear looked at his, and there was the spoon in his porridge bowl, but the porridge was all gone. "Somebody's been eating my porridge and has eaten it all up," cried baby bear. Now next, Papa Bear took a look at the chairs arranged around the fireplace.
"Somebody's been sitting in my chair,"
he said in his rough, gruff voice. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," said Mama Bear. "And somebody's been sitting in my chair and broke it all up," cried Baby Bear. Well, then the three bears climbed the ladder up to the bedroom.
"Somebody's been lying in my bed,"
said Papa Bear. "And somebody's been lying in my bed," said Mama Bear. And Baby Bear cried out, "Somebody's been lying in my bed, and she's still there." Goldilocks woke up and saw the three bears looking down at her with angry frowns on their faces.
"Well, young lady, what have you to say for yourself?"
growled Papa Bear. "Well," stammered Goldilocks, "I saw your pretty little house, and I just had to look inside. And then I saw the 3 bowls of porridge, and I just had to have a taste. And then I saw the 3 chairs by the fireplace, and I just had to try them out. And then," she said, choking back a sob, because all of a sudden she realized she had been a very naughty girl, "I saw the 3 beds, and I just had to have a nap." Mama Bear's eyes softened. "All you had to do was wait till we came home, and you could have been our guest. It's not right to take things that don't belong to you." Goldilocks looked up at her and said, "I'm very, very sorry. I won't ever do it again." And Baby Bear looked at Papa Bear. "Can the little girl stay and play with me today?" Papa Bear looked down at Goldilocks and said,
"Well, why don't we all go downstairs and have some toast and honey, and we'll talk about it."
And so they did. And soon Goldilocks and Baby Bear became best friends and visited each other almost every day. And Goldilocks never ever went into someone's house without asking again. The end. Winkin', blinkin', and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe. They sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. "Where are you going and what do you wish?" the old man asked the 3. "We've come to fish for the herring fish that swim in the beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we," said Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. So all night long the nets they threw to the stars in the twinkling foam. Then down from the sky came the wooden shoe, bringing the fishermen home. 'Twas oh so pretty a sail it seemed, as if it could not be. And some folks thought 'twas a dream that dreamed of sailing the beautiful sea. But I shall name you the fishermen 3, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Winkin' and blinkin' are 2 little eyes, and Nod is a weary head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while Daddy sings of the wonderful sights that be. And you shall see all the beautiful things as you rock in that misty sea. Just like the fishermen 3, winkin', blinkin', and Nod. The 3 Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there was a mother pig who had 3 little piggy sons. And one day, she sat them down around the kitchen table. "The time has come," she said, "for you to go out into the world and make your own homes." The little pigs looked at each other like they might cry. "Well, you can still come home and visit, of course," she said. "Yay!" cried the little pigs, and that was that. Well, the next day, the little pigs set out down the road, each one carrying a bundle of clothes, a few books, and a picture of their mother, wrapped up in a brightly colored cloth and tied to a stick, which they rested on their shoulders. Well, as they walked along, they all agreed that they would each build their own houses, but that they would put them all in a row on a pretty little lane. "I'm going to build a little house all made out of straw," said Frederick, "and it'll be the nicest house you ever saw." "Well, why would you want to build a house made out of straw?" asked Thomas. "Because it's quick to build," said Frederick, "and if I run out of food, I can always have a nibble on the walls." "Well," said Thomas, "I would never build a house out of straw. I'm going to build mine out of wooden sticks, and it'll be the nicest house you ever saw." "But why would you want to build a house made out of wooden sticks?" asked Harry. "Well," said Thomas, "it takes a little more time to build than a straw house, but it's much stronger. And besides," he said, "if it gets cold in the winter, I can always take a stick or 2 out of the wall and feed the fire in the stove to stay warm." "Well," said Harry, "I'm going to build my house out of bricks." Thomas and Frederick looked at each other. "Bricks!" they exclaimed. "Brick houses take forever to build, and a whole lot more work, too." "Yes, that's true," said Harry, "but a brick house is a strong house. And besides, bricks are the same color as apples, and apples are my favorite thing to eat in the whole world." Well, just around noon, when the 3 pigs were thinking of stopping for a bite of lunch, they came to a little shady lane. It looked like a leafy green tunnel that curved gently alongside a little bubbling stream. And Thomas said, "This looks like just the place to build our houses." Now, luckily, Harry had a cell phone, so after a quick call to Mother Pig, she was just fine, by the way, they all took turns phoning the stores that sold the stuff that they'd need to build their houses, and then they settled down by the little stream and ate lunch. And later on that afternoon, all kinds of trucks arrived with straw and wood and bricks and tools and things. Luckily, Frederick had a credit card, and so after signing a few pieces of paper, the trucks drove away and the little pigs began to build. Now they decided that the houses would be arranged in this order. Frederick's straw house would be number 1 Shady Lane. Thomas's wooden stick house would be number 2 Shady Lane. And Harry's red brick house would be number 3 Shady Lane. Now the little pigs worked and worked and worked, and finally by supper time, the straw house was finished, and the wood stick house was half done, and Harry's brick house looked like it was hardly started on account of the foundation. So Frederick invited Thomas and Harry to spend the night in his house, which they did. Now the next morning it was back to work for Thomas and Harry, while Frederick sat by the river and sipped his iced tea and thought about the life of fish and watched the water slide by under the willow trees. Well, finally by supper time, Thomas's wooden stick house was finished, and Harry's house looked halfway done, on account of spending a lot of time getting confused wiring up the doorbell. Harry was pretty good with bricks, but he was hopeless with wires. So Thomas invited Harry to spend the night at his house, and that's what he did. Now the next morning, it was back to work for Harry, and Thomas joined Frederick by the stream for some lemonade, and together they tried to figure out why the sky was blue. And by supper time, they decided the sky was blue just because. And when they turned around, they gasped. Harry had finished his house, and it was beautiful. So he invited Thomas and Frederick over for dinner to celebrate the completion of his house, and that's what they did. The next morning, Frederick was rudely woken out of his sleep by someone pounding on his little door. "Whoever that is has no manners at all," Frederick grumbled, pulling on his dressing gown. He peeked out the window, and there at his door was the big bad wolf. "Open up!" yelled the big bad wolf. "I thought you only lived in fairy tales," called back Frederick with his voice trembling. "That's what they all say," yelled back the big bad wolf. "Well, what do you want?" asked Frederick, shaking in his little hoof-shaped slippers. "I want you to come out so I can gobble you up," yelled the big bad wolf. "Do you always have to yell?" asked Frederick, becoming a little annoyed.
Yes, I do,
yelled back the big bad wolf, and I guess he was right.
You come out of your house this minute, or I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down.
You will not, said Frederick. It's only 3 days old, so it's very strong.
You asked for it,
yelled the big bad wolf. He really was a very rude wolf. So the big bad wolf huffed and he puffed and he began to blow, and the little house began to tremble. The walls started to shake, the floor began to quake. My, gasped little Frederick, I better get out of here. And quick as a wink, he jumped out of the kitchen window and ran to number 2 Shady Lane, which was Thomas's house. And just in the nick of time, because the big bad wolf flattened the little straw house. Let me in, shouted Frederick as he banged on Thomas's door. Thomas opened the door, and Frederick ran in and slammed the door behind him. What's going on? Asked Thomas. See for yourself, said Frederick, pointing out the window with his little piggy heart trembling. Thomas looked over at what was once Frederick's house and saw the big bad wolf picking through the bits of straw and broken dishes, which was all that was left of Frederick's house. The big bad wolf was really mad that the first little piggy had escaped, and he turned his shaggy head to look over at Thomas's wooden stick house.
So that's where he went to,
muttered the big bad wolf as he stomped over and yelled out,
You little pigs, come out here with your hoofs up, or I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down.
No way, said Thomas. This house is only 2 days old, and it's much stronger than that straw house was. No offense, he said, turning to Frederick. None taken, said Frederick, his teeth still chattering. You asked for it, yelled the big bad wolf, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he began to blow, and the little house began to tremble. The walls started to shake, the floor began to quake. My, gasped little Thomas, we've got to get out of here. And quick as a wink, they jumped out of the kitchen window and ran to number 3 Shady Lane, which was Harry's house. And just in the nick of time, because the big bad wolf flattened that little wooden stick home in just 1 minute more than it took to destroy the straw house. Let us in, shouted Thomas and Frederick as they banged on Harry's door. Harry opened the door, and Thomas and Frederick ran in and slammed the door behind them. What's going on? Asked Harry. See for yourself, said Thomas, pointing out the window with his little piggy heart trembling. Harry looked over and saw the big bad wolf picking through piles of sticks and grumbling. The big bad wolf was really, really mad that now the first and the second little piggies had both escaped, and he turned his shaggy head to look over at Harry's brick house. The big bad wolf strode over and yelled,
I got you all now. There's no other house to escape to, so you may as well come out quietly.
Harry called back, Blow all you want, you big bad wolf. It won't do you any good.
I've heard that one before,
yelled the big bad wolf. Harry called out the window, You just go ahead and blow. We're going to have some breakfast. And with that, he closed the window and went to get some food out of the fridge. Now the big bad wolf was not used to being talked to like this, and his face got red, and his hair stood on end, and he began to huff and puff and huff and puff, and the little brick house didn't shake, didn't quake, didn't even tremble. Another piece of toast? Harry asked Thomas. Yes, please, replied Thomas. Frederick looked out the window and cried, Hey, come and take a look. The 3 little pigs gathered at the window and looked out. And there, lying face down in the lane, was the big bad wolf. He was exhausted. He must have blown himself out, said Harry. And I guess he was right. And standing above him was a very angry mother pig. You get up on your feet, you big bad wolf, she said.
Yes, Mrs. Pig.
The big bad wolf whimpered, slowly standing up. Mother Pig twisted his ear. Now you come with me to see your mother, and we'll see what she has to say about you running all around the country blowing little pigs' houses down.
Yes, Mrs. Pig,
said the big bad wolf in a small voice, and together they turned to go. Oh, Mother, called out Harry, after you've taken the big bad wolf back home, would you come over for lunch? All right, Harry, she replied, and by the way, that's a very nice house you've built. And off she went with a very sheepish-looking big bad wolf walking ahead of her. While doing the dishes, the 3 little pigs decided to live all together in a little brick house happily ever after. And that's what they did. The end. Upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown, rapping at the window and crying through the lock. Are all the children in their beds? It's past 8 o'clock. Wee Willie Winky running through the town, upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown.
Oswald, bedtime. Oswald, bedtime.
The Country Mouse and the City Mouse. Once upon a time, a little country mouse invited his cousin, who is a little city mouse, to come and visit him. When the little city mouse sat down to dinner, he was surprised to find that the country mouse had nothing to eat except some grains and a few wild berries. "Is this all there is to eat?" he asked. "Why, yes," said the country mouse. "Is something wrong?" "Well," said the city mouse, "you don't eat well at all. You should see how I live in town. I have all sorts of fine things to eat every day. Come and visit me one day and you'll see how nice it is to live in the city." The little country mouse was so excited. He'd never been to town before, so he quickly agreed, and a few days later he packed a little suitcase and went to the city to visit his cousin. Now his cousin lived in a big mansion in a very fancy part of the town. And the very first place that the city mouse showed the country mouse was the pantry where the people who owned the house kept their food. And there on a low shelf stood a big bag of sugar. The little city mouse gnawed a hole in a corner of the bag and invited his cousin to help himself. Now the two little mice nibbled and ate, and the country mouse thought he had never tasted anything so delicious in his whole life. He was just thinking how lucky the city mouse was, when suddenly the door opened with a bang, and in came the cook to get something out of the pantry. He started banging boxes and jars and everything around. "Run," whispered the city mouse, and they ran as fast as they could to the little hole where they had come in. The two little mice flattened themselves against the wall. The little country mouse was shaking in his little mousy boots. "Who was that?" he asked, his little teeth chattering. The city mouse said, "Don't worry about him. He'll leave in a minute and we can get back and have some more food." After the cook finished banging around and shut the door to the pantry, they tiptoed back, and this time the city mouse took the little country mouse to another shelf higher up, and there was a big bag of delicious peanuts. The city mouse nibbled open a corner of the bag, and the two little mice tugged out a couple of plump peanuts and sat down for a nice meal. But all of a sudden, there was a scratching noise at the door, and they heard a horrible sound. "Meow." Horrible for a mouse, that is. "What's that?" said the country mouse. The city mouse said, "Quickly, follow me," and they ran as fast as they could to the hole. As soon as they were around the corner, the city mouse said, "That was Whiskers, the house cat. If she gets a hold of you, it'll be your last meal." "I've never been more scared in my whole life," said the little country mouse, his little mousy knees trembling. "Let's not go back to the pantry anymore." "Okay," said the city mouse, "I'll take you somewhere even better. Down in the basement is where they keep the really good stuff." So the city mouse took his little friend down the basement stairs and through a hole into a room that was just filled to bursting with the fanciest food the country mouse had ever seen. there were big bricks of butter and huge rounds of cheese and sausages and meats and vegetables and fruits on every shelf. "This is amazing," cried the country mouse. "What did I tell you?" laughed the city mouse, and they ran from shelf to shelf, tasting a bit here, nibbling a bit there. The country mouse had never tasted so many wonderful flavors in his whole life. And then, over in a corner, he saw a beautiful mouse-sized chunk of creamy cheese on a funny-looking little wooden plate. "That must be just for me," he thought, and ran straight for it. He sniffed it with his little whiskered nose. It smelled like heaven. He was just about to put his head down to take a bite when the city mouse grabbed him by the collar and pulled him roughly back. "Hey, what are you doing?" cried the country mouse. "That's a mousetrap, my silly cousin." The little country mouse asked, "What's a mousetrap?" "It's a horrible thing. The minute you take a bite of cheese, a spring releases and something whacks you on the back of your head." The little country mouse looked at the trap, and he looked at the cheese, and he looked at the little city mouse. "If it's all the same to you," he said, "I'm going to go back to the country. Well, maybe I don't have fancy cheeses and nuts and sausages to eat like you do here in the city, but I can nibble my berries and grain safely in my snug little hole, and I never, ever have to be afraid." So the little country mouse shook hands with the city mouse and went back to the country, where he lived happily and safely ever after. The end. Tell me why the stars do shine. Tell me why the ivy twines. Tell me why the sky's so blue. And I will tell you just why I love you. Because God made the stars to shine. Because God made the ivy twine. Because God made the sky so blue. Because God made you, that's why I love you. Why the stars do shine. Tell me why the ivy twines. Tell me why the sky is so blue. And I Because God made the ivy twine, because God made the sky so blue, because God made you, that's why I love you. Because God made you, that's why I love you. And now I've told you just why I love you. The Tortoise and the Rabbit. Once upon a time, there was a rabbit who was a very, very fast runner. He was forever boasting how he could run faster than anyone else, and was forever teasing Tortoise for his slowness. And then one day, the Tortoise had heard enough, and he answered back, "Who do you think you are? I know you're fast. Everyone knows that. But just because you're fast doesn't mean you can't be beaten." The rabbit squealed with laughter because he was also quite rude. "Beaten in a race? Who could beat me?" he asked, looking around. "Well," said the Tortoise slowly, "maybe I could." The rabbit threw back his head and he laughed again. "You must be joking." "Well, I'll make a deal with you," said the Tortoise. "If I run a race with you and I win, will you promise never to brag again?" "Well, I'll make a deal with you," said the rabbit when he had finished laughing. "If you win the race, I'll never brag again, and I'll eat my hat." The Tortoise accepted the challenge. The course was planned, and the next day at dawn, all the animals in the neighborhood gathered at the starting line to watch the race. The wise old owl looked kindly at the Tortoise. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. The Tortoise looked up at the old owl. "Well, to tell you the truth, I wish I was sitting by the pond catching flies. But if I don't beat that rabbit at his own game, I'm afraid we'll never hear the end of it." So the old owl stood up straight and said in a loud voice, "Ready, steady, go!" All the animals cheered. Off the rabbit ran quick as the wind. Off the Tortoise trudged as quickly as his little legs could carry him, which wasn't very fast at all. The rabbit was out of sight before you could count to 3, and the Tortoise was well within sight after you could count to 100. But he was determined to finish the race, and so on he went. After a few moments, the rabbit looked back to see how far ahead he was. He looked, he strained, he squinted, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see the Tortoise at all. "He's even slower than I thought he was," thought the rabbit to himself. Well, the day was warm and the sun was hot, so the rabbit sat under a shady tree to take a rest. He stretched and yawned and laughed to himself. "Well, that poor Tortoise must have been crazy to think he could beat me. Everyone knows I'm the fastest runner in the world. Of course they do. I keep reminding him, don't I?" That rabbit even boasted when no one was around. Well, it was very cool and pleasant underneath that shady tree, and the rabbit thought to himself, "Well, that Tortoise is so slow, I guess I could take a nap and still beat him by a mile." And so the rabbit nestled into the grass and curled up into a ball and drifted off to sleep and was soon snoring happily. Hours later, the sun started to sink, and the moon was starting to peek over the horizon, and the Tortoise, who had been plodding toward the winning post since morning, was almost at the finish line. At that very moment, the rabbit woke with a jolt, and he looked wildly around. "Oh no, I've overslept. Where can that Tortoise be?" And to his amazement, he could see the Tortoise like a speck in the distance, just a few feet away from the finish line. Well, up like lightning he bolted, and away he dashed. He leapt and bounded at a great rate, his tongue lolling and gasping for breath. He had never run so fast in all his life. He got closer and closer to the Tortoise. Meanwhile, the Tortoise, who was very tired, was only a few inches away from the line, He could hear the rabbit's feet pounding on the dirt track, getting closer and closer.
I know I can do it,
the tortoise said to himself,
steady does it.
and plodded on. And now he could hear the rabbit's rasping breath getting closer and closer, his footsteps getting louder and louder. The rabbit prepared to make his last leap.
Just one more step,
The tortoise gasped. He lifted his front foot and slowly and carefully placed it firmly over the finish line, just a moment before the rabbit streaked by in a flash. The owl waved the checkered flag. The tortoise had won the race. All the animals went wild with joy, and they clapped the old tortoise on the back and shook his hand to congratulate him. Poor rabbit. Tired and embarrassed, he slumped down beside the tortoise, who was silently smiling at him. I can't believe you beat me,
slow but sure wins the race,
said the tortoise. Well, I suppose I'd better start eating my hat, said the rabbit, and pulled it off his head.
Well, I don't think that'll be necessary,
replied the tortoise.
Just promise me that you'll stop your boasting and just be friendly.
Well, the rabbit promised solemnly, and as time went by, the tortoise and the rabbit became the best of friends and lived happily ever after. The end. Little boy blue, come blow your horn. The sheep's in the meadow, the cow's in the corn. Where is the boy who looks after the sheep? He's under the haystack fast asleep. Will you wake him? No, not I. For if I do, he's sure to cry. Little boy blue, come blow your horn. The sheep's in the meadow, the cow's in the corn. Where is the boy who looks after the sheep? He's under the haystack fast asleep. Will you wake him? No, not I. For if I do, he's sure to cry. Little boy blue, come blow your horn. The sheep's in the meadow, the cow's in the corn. Where is the boy who looks after the sheep? He's under the haystack fast asleep. Will you wake him? No, The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, down on an old farm lived a duck family, and Mother Duck had been sitting on a clutch of new eggs. One beautiful morning, the eggs hatched and out popped 6 chirpy ducklings. But one egg was bigger than the rest, and it didn't hatch. Mother Duck didn't remember laying that 7th egg. How did it get there? The little prisoner was pecking inside his shell. Did I count the eggs wrongly? Mother Duck wondered. But before she had time to think about it, the last egg finally hatched. A strange-looking duckling with gray feathers that should have been yellow gazed at a worried mother. "I can't understand how this ugly duckling can be one of mine," she said to herself. "But I will love her just the same." Well, the gray duckling certainly wasn't pretty, and since she ate far more than her brothers and sisters, she was fast outgrowing them. As the days went by, the poor ugly duckling became more and more unhappy. Her brothers and sisters didn't want to play with her. She was so clumsy. And all the farmyard folks simply laughed at her. She felt sad and lonely, while Mother Duck did her best to console her. "Oh, don't you worry, you poor little thing," she would say. "Don't forget that you're beautiful on the inside." But the ugly duckling felt worse than ever. She secretly wept at night. She felt nobody wanted her. "Nobody but my mother loves me. They all tease me. Why am I different from my brothers and sisters?" Then one day at sunrise, she decided to run away from the farmyard. She stopped at a pond and began to question all the other birds. "Do you know of any ducklings with gray feathers like mine?" But everyone shook their heads. "We don't know anyone who looks like you." The ugly duckling didn't give up and kept on asking around. She went to another pond where a pair of large geese gave her the same answer to her question. And what's more, they warned her, "Don't stay here. Go away. It's dangerous. There are men with guns around here." The poor little duckling was sorry she had ever left the farmyard. Then one day, her travels took her near an old country woman's cottage. The old woman's eyesight was poor, and she thought the duckling was a stray goose and caught her. "I'll put this goose in the chicken house. I hope it lays plenty of eggs," said the old woman. But the ugly duckling laid not a single egg. The hens kept frightening her. "You just wait. If you don't lay eggs, the old woman will pop you into the pot to make a stew." And the cat chipped in, "That's if the fox doesn't get you first." The poor ugly duckling was so scared that she lost her appetite, though the old woman kept stuffing her with food and grumbling, "If you won't lay any eggs, at least hurry up and get plump." "Oh, dear me," moaned the now terrified duckling. "I'll die of fright first, and all I wanted was someone to love me." Well, then one night, finding the chicken house door left open just a little bit, she escaped. She looked up at the sky, and there, flying in a pattern and lit up by the moon, was a group of beautiful swans. "If only I could look like a swan," she cried to herself. Once again she was all alone. She ran away as far as she could, and at dawn she found herself in a thick bed of reeds. "If nobody wants me, I'll just hide here forever." But soon winter came, and the water in the reed bed froze, and the poor duckling had to leave the marsh to look for food in the snow. And one day she was so tired and hungry, she dropped exhausted to the ground. But it just so happened that a farmer found her and put her in his big jacket pocket.
"I'll take her home to my children. They'll look after her. Poor thing. She's frozen."
Well, the duckling was showered with care and love at the farmer's house. In this way, the ugly duckling was able to survive the bitterly cold winter. But by springtime, she had grown so big that the farmer decided, "I'll set her free by the pond." That was when the duckling saw herself mirrored in the water. She had a long, graceful, curved neck and a yellow beak and lovely, long, white wings. "Goodness, how I've changed! I hardly recognize myself. I look just like those beautiful birds I saw last autumn. I must be a swan." Just then her mother and brothers and sisters came paddling by. She called out, "Mother, it's me." Mother Duck looked at her. "I'm sorry," she said. Do I know you?" "Mother, it's me. I'm your ugly duckling. Don't you recognize my voice?" The mother duck swam over and gave her daughter a big hug and a kiss. "It is you. But what's happened to you? I was so worried. You were always beautiful on the inside, but now you've become beautiful on the outside too." At that moment, a group of swans gracefully came down from the sky and smoothly glided onto the pond. "You see, Mother, I never was a duckling after all. I was a swan from the very beginning." The other swans gathered around the little group by the shore. "You're a swan just like us," they said. "Where have you been hiding?" "It's a long story," replied the little swan. And from then on she swam happily with her fellow swans, and of course with her old family as well. And she lived happily ever after. The end.
Lullaby and good night, with roses bedight, with the noblest slumbers be blessed. Lay thee down and rest. May thy slumbers be blessed. Lay thee down and rest. May thy slumbers be